Hi, everybody. Today is Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and our friends Ray McGovern and John Helmer are back with us. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
let's get started with the meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. And they talk about the situation in the Middle East as well as the conflict between the United States and Iran. Here is what Netanyahu and Donald Trump said about Iran.
Just Iran. Look, we're both united in the goal that Iran does not ever get nuclear weapons. If it can be done diplomatically in a full way, the way it was done in Libya, I think that would be a good thing. But whatever happens, we have to make sure that Iran does not have nuclear weapons. That's the end of my speech.
Mr. President, can you try to explain to know what is your
We're having
plan to
direct
getting all
talks
the
with,
others
wait a
denied?
minute, wait. We're having direct talks with Iran, and they've started. It'll go on Saturday. We have a very big meeting, and we'll see what can happen. And I think everybody agrees that doing a deal would be preferable to doing the obvious. And the obvious is not something that I want to be involved with, or frankly, that Israel wants to be involved with if they can avoid it. So we're going to see if we can avoid it. But it's getting to be very dangerous territory. And hopefully those talks will be successful. And I think it would be in Iran's best interest if they are successful. We hope that's going to happen.
I think we can separate the way that Donald Trump sees the negotiations and the way that Netanyahu wants them to be. And Ray, what's your take on the way that Netanyahu was talking about Libya-style sort of disarmament, or it was a disarmament in the case of Libya, but is the Trump administration interested in that sort of negotiations? Are they hoping that they can achieve that with Iran?
Well, let's go back to Libya. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, everything's
Okay.
fine.
That was 2003, I believe, and very artful negotiators, part of whom came from the CIA, persuaded Gaddafi that it'd really be a good idea just to give up this whole nuclear weapons program. And he did. What happened to him? Well, you remember Secretary of State Hillary Clinton cackling when he was killed in a most unseemly way, that is, Gaddafi was. We came, he saw, he died. In other words, do countries need any further proof of what happens if you give up your nuclear weapons? Now, the irony here is that Iran doesn't have any nuclear weapons. What Netanyahu and Trump are pushing on is an open door. And I hope it opens very quickly, because then they'll fall right on their face. That's what happens when you push an open door. And as we've gone over several times, Nima, the intelligence community, mirabile dictu, surprisingly, has reiterated their assessment that at the end of 2003, Khamenei ordered no more nuclear program to the extent there was one that existed, and that since then there is absolutely zero evidence that Iran is working on a nuclear weapon. So when Netanyahu pronounces, as he just did in that little clip, we cannot let Iran have a nuclear weapon. Well, somebody ought to show him what the intelligence community says. Mossad, of course, knows the same thing. And actually, if further proof were needed, you have the 2-week-old annual threat assessment, which in the intelligence community again says, look, Khamenei forbade development of nuclear weapons back at the end of 2003, and we have no evidence that Khamenei has reauthorized such work. And the footnote to all this is that even Bill Burns, Bill Burns, who told the world 2 years ago Putin had already lost, that his army had been shown to ridicule to the whole world. They told the president to say that this was in Ukraine, of course. Bill Burns must have had a pang of conscience, or maybe he went to confession, and his penance was just tell the truth once, please, before you leave. And what he did was he said, oh, by the way, quite gratuitously, Iran is still not working on a nuclear weapon. And remember, folks, that we will know right away if they do start working on that. We know right quick. I mean, the cameras all over the place, satellite photography of all kinds of imagery. We would know right quick. So there's the open door. What's really going on here, of course, is Netanyahu wants the U.S. to join in on an attack on Iran. And in my view, he failed. Did Netanyahu know that Trump was going to say, I am sending my right-hand man, Steve Witkoff, to Oman to talk with the Iranian foreign minister? Call him direct, call him indirect. This was a big surprise, I think, to the Israelis. And to me, it means that Trump, somebody probably got that Trump. Maybe Trump watches you, Nima, when you have Larry Wilkerson on. And Trump all of a sudden said, my God, Wilkerson says that the Iranians can destroy Israel beyond repair. Check that out, will you? And the military comes back and says, Wilkerson's a pretty smart guy. Yeah, they can. So even Trump and Witkoff, even if you say they have Israel first here, they don't want Israel to be destroyed. And not only that, but their troops in the area would also be destroyed. Their equipment in the area would be destroyed. And another sort of ray of light that I saw just today, actually I saw it watching you and Larry Wilkerson yesterday, there was that at least the Iranians have decided or have announced that they're going to withdraw support, or they're going to ask their proxies in, was it Iraq or Syria, to lie down, to stay safe. So I have more hope now than I did this time last week that there will be some sort of a deal cut here. And I've always thought that whether it was Larry Wilkerson or whoever got to Trump, they told him cold turkey that this would be a regional war and we would lose short of using nuclear weapons. And lastly, last time I checked, when the Israelis did attack Iran, some of their aircraft stopped short and flung their missiles out from wider range than usual, okay? And why was that? Well, these very stealthy, these very secretive F-35s, all of a sudden they realized that Iranian radar, or Russian-Iranian radar, had locked onto them. Whoa, that's not supposed to happen to stealth aircraft, right? So we got these big bombers in Diego Garcia now. We got refueler tanks and all that kind of stuff. Well, what about? Are they stealthy enough to get through Iranian defenses? Maybe somebody has told Trump that that's not the case, that they will be detected, they'll be shut down, and you'll have a regional war there that you don't want because you're so damn vulnerable, the U.S. is, as well as Israel. Sorry to carry on so long, but this is rather... Well, I did an interview yesterday, which I said these things, and then I looked at all the traffic. I said, "Well, maybe I'm right," So who knows? Everyone has their own views on this. We'll see what happens on Saturday, but Saturday is big in my view.
John, your take.
We were the ones that I think in our last program who said that Trump is bluffing with in the deployment of the B-2 in Diego Garcia, and his force threats will fail because the force calculation is that whatever he thinks he can throw at Iran now has mutual assured destruction. It has the capability to attack even after it's been attacked at both the United States targets both naval and air and ground targets in the Middle East and against Israel. And we did say then, so as not to repeat it, that Israel cannot survive a sustained Iraqi missile attack on its electricity infrastructure, its gas and energy infrastructure, and so forth. So I think over the last few minutes, literally, because of Trump's stand down on the tariff threat and the escalation of tariff threat against China, we can see a number of things that are important. One is Trump can be and is being defeated. Second, we have a problem of applying rational measurement against Trump. And let me explain that, because I've seen it expressed as you can't apply rationality to an irrational man. That's not what I see. What I see is that it's very difficult for we Americans to analyze the way Russians think and Middle Easterners, both Persians, Iranians, and Arabs think, or Jews think. I say Jews, not Zionists, Jews think. What we have here is has happened before. It happens when empires break up and collapse and lose their strength. It's happened, if we look closely, to the ancient Roman Empire. And if we go very carefully at both the archaeology and the analysis of the first 300 years of coup, counter-coup, emperor murdered, emperor replaced history of the Roman Empire, what we see then happening is what's happening to Trump now. The two methods that ancient Roman historians or ancient Greek historians use, and I'll explain how we'll apply these to the Trump circle, and we'll apply it to the Oman negotiations. The two methods for analysis are prosopography. I never get this right. Prosopography. That's an analysis of what we would call the network around the ruler. His wife, his mother-in-law, his brothers, where they live, what tribe, clan, location they come from. In the US terms, what university they went to, whether they served in the army, what units they served, and so forth and so on. It's the network on which rule is based for loyalty. Not brains, not policy, loyalty, to keep the top guy in power and prevent someone else killing him or replacing him. The second method the ancient Roman histories are written from is epigraphy. Epigraphy is the study of inscriptions dug out of the ground, found in tombs, scribbled in temples, and so forth. They are inscriptions, thousands of them. What you look at when you look at inscription is not just the name and the statement of fact, because inscriptions, epigraphy doesn't prove fact, it proves advertisement. The situation with Trump is exact. The inscriptions of ancient Rome are the tweets Trump produces. They come at a rate of one every hour of a 24-hour day. I've looked up the averages. Our audience can do it for themselves. They go to rollcall.com. Roughly speaking, Trump's organization has abandoned all forms of rational communication as we policymakers or intelligence analysts or advisors to the head of state would term them. Not papers. These are inscriptions. These are advertisements. These are threats. They show a certain mentality. They also show a fundamental weakness if you're the ancient Roman emperor, or who was put there by his mother-in-law, and locality, or the president of the United States as we currently find him. Take a look at the way in which these tweets work, and you'll see exactly what a Roman emperor used to think. A Roman emperor in the 3rd and 4th centuries thought his will was the law. His will becomes the law. When you watch Trump wave these executive orders that he signs so significantly every afternoon, you are watching a man who thinks his will should be law or must be law or is law until somebody resists so effectively. His force calculation is he will be defeated. Then he backs down and runs away. That's what he's done in the face of this huge stock market retaliation. And second, the sudden lift in the price of US treasuries, the cost to the United States government of servicing its debt. Both of these were huge votes of no confidence in the so-called tariff campaign. So he's backed down. Now, it's simply the case, and Ray said it one way, Colonel Wilkerson said it another, Ambassador Freeman said it another in your program just before us, and we said it last week. Trump cannot be persuaded rationally. You can't argue the reasonableness of policy with his tweets. His aim is to demonstrate personal power. Crush, or as he said in the clip, we hope we will achieve it by negotiation, meaning he sends Vitkov to deliver capitulation terms to the Iranians, or we will do the obvious, which means kill them, bomb them to the Stone Age and so forth. Now, this is typical of an insecure emperor losing his empire against forces he cannot fight for fear of suffering significant loss. And that's what's likely to have happened when the Pentagon, not Hegseth. Hegseth is one of the sycophantic emperor's stooges, one of the eunuchs, one of the paid off centurions around the emperor who will say and do anything. So's Waltz, so's Rubio. What's happening is that we make a mistake in trying to treat the threat of war against Iran as if it's a rational and therefore a violation of reasonableness in achieving a reduction of nuclear threat in the Middle East. What's happening is that Trump postures, threatens, and then if faced with a possible defeat, can't risk a defeat, can't even risk a counterstrike against something like a US aircraft carrier or a base. Since he can't risk the force calculation that exists in the Middle East, he can be defeated, and he will be defeated before he backs down. And when he backs down, he knows he's been defeated, but he doesn't think so. So he moves on to another set of targets. Now, your question was what happens in Oman on Saturday. A lot has been said about the Iranian motivation for having indirect talks versus Trump's statement that there should be that there are direct talks. Well, of course there are direct talks already. That's how the meetings were set up. Of course, in Oman, where nobody can see the proceedings, in one room you've got one palatial establishment, you've got Vitkov and his advisors, and in another you've got Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi on the Iranian side, and running between them you may have Americans, you may have Iranians, or you may have Omanis, or you may have tape recorders. If you see what the Iranians are doing, not from a rational US point of view, but from a Middle Eastern, Byzantine, Greco-Roman, or Jewish point of view, what they've done is very, very interesting, and I've tried it myself. What they've done is to say to Vitkov, don't think you're going to see our eyes, our faces, our bodies when you put your papers and demands on the table. Let's see if you put your demands on the table, do they mean the JCPOA terms that we've already agreed to, but your side abolished? Do they include capitulation and the removal of all our missile capabilities? Do they mean total disarmament, which Israel demands of us? Do they mean the Libyan model? If that's what you deliver indirectly, there is going to be no meeting, because there can be no eye-to-eye contact against the Bronx realtor. Witkoff is from the Bronx. He sells real estate, buys cheap, sells expensive. It's a hustle. It's normal business. But the Iranians have taken a Middle Eastern approach and have said, we know what's coming, so put it on paper if you dare, and we'll know whether to meet you directly or simply say, no, 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 we'll tick the boxes. Now, I once did that in Greece when George Shultz, representing the Reagan administration, arrived in Athens to threaten the Prime Minister of Greece, that whom we knew, the Greek side knew, were attempting to overthrow him. Schultz said, we are not going to tolerate your support of the Palestinians. We're not going to tolerate your resistance to our plan of attack against Libya. So you will do what we tell you to do. We knew this was coming, or we will hit you with sanctions, which included for Greece a travel advisory that warned the United States tourists not to go to Greece that summer. That was a multi-billion-dollar sanction. So what we set up was a bare room in the Prime Ministry in which George Shultz would have to sit in a soft, cozy armchair that sat his ass below the level of the stiffer chair the Prime Minister of Greece was sitting on. There was to be no side table where we knew George Shultz needed to place his briefing book and his script. What we had was a physical arrangement to make Shultz uncomfortable and therefore unconfident of reading the riot act, the threat, the ultimatum to Greece. And he forgot it, or he didn't feel confident to say it. What the Iranians are doing is standard Middle Eastern, Byzantine, Greco-Roman tactics to prevent an enemy, and Witkoff is nothing but an enemy, from attempting to say, I saw them face to face, I looked them in the eyes, to take away from the Bronx realtor his only sense of confidence. He knows the other side of the table. If what he offers by indirect means on paper, paper is not what Bronx realtors ever push. Hustlers don't use paper. They use other methods, but essentially underneath it is a threat of force. If Witkoff shows up with a threat of force, the Iranians have nothing more to say. But we now know Trump's threats of force are bluffs, which he will withdraw if his own military tells him, you face a loss. You might blow them to smithereens, but they will do significant damage to you. You will not be able to tweet this as a victory. Now, what happens from a Russian point of view, from an American point of view, when all of this is clear? Well, two things seem to me to be pretty clear. President Trump is in serious danger of succession plotting by people like Vance. Vance has ambition to be president of the United States, but if Trump shows regularly he's bluffing, he's weak, he's vulnerable, and out of Vance's control, Vance sees Trump for lunch more often than Trump gets intelligence briefings from anyone else. If Vance sees Trump could ruin Vance's political ascension, then the heir apparent will plot against the emperor and overthrow him. Second, the Russian side, which has had a great deal of difficulty since Yevgeny Primakov and Leonid Shebashin, the former foreign minister whose mother was Jewish, and Leonid Shebashin, the head of the KGB's first directorate, and an expert on India, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. Since they died, the level of competence on the Russian side to play the Byzantine, Middle Eastern, Jewish, Greco-Roman game has diminished. But the Russian side in the foreign ministry level has known how to handle the sort of threats that were coming. And they handled it by doing two things. First, in August 2021, Foreign Minister Lavrov, who's Armenian by origin, just by the way, to do a little bit of ancient network analysis, launched the Persian Gulf security concept. And I can wave it on the screen. Here it is. This is a multilateral disarmament plan. And it says, without undue external interference, which means the United States, it proposes a universal security system based on the principle of common and indivisible security. That means if the Israelis have nuclear weapons threatening, Iran will not disarm unless the Israeli, it's indivisible security of one, security of all. And third principle on the Russian plan 2021, a step-by-step movement towards an inclusive security system in the Persian Gulf. That was issued 2021. Now, what did Iranian representative, Chinese representative, and Moscow representative discuss on Monday in this week when they said, when they were announced as being at expert level, no names released, they will have a discussion on how to deal with the Trump threat. They didn't quite say it that way. There's been no press announcement, no tweet, no inscription, nothing to indicate what they actually said. What they were doing was a Middle Eastern display of the things that Trump can't cope with. They were showing that Iran, China, and Russia are combined to deter a US military attack. Two, they were showing uncertainty. You, the enemy, Trump and his eunuchs, must understand they face uncertainty for their own outcome, which means uncertainty for their political careers, their power, and their money. Third, they're showing, and this is misinterpreted, the force calculation that Russia and Iran can present to the United States is much greater than the force assembled in Diego Garcia, and it threatens the United States, as we've said, and Israel. It's not just the case, and we've discussed this on your program, Nima, in the past, that there is no commitment in the strategic alliance between Russia, or strategic pact between Russia and Iran, that Pezeshkian and Putin signed in January. There is no commitment that if one side is attacked, the other side will join in. But there is a commitment to cooperate, and the terms of cooperation are those elements: deterrence, uncertainty, and the assurance that when Vitkov lands in Oman, he can be assured that he, who can sell real estate in the Bronx, can't predict what Iran and Russia and China combined can do to him. Now, think of it from a Middle Eastern point of view. Think of it from a Russian point of view, and look at what Trump has just done. He has backed down on his most important domestic so-called policy. But Roman emperors didn't have policies. They didn't have strategies. They made wars. They handed out benefits to their family, their wives, children, and so forth. They planned for succession. They displayed gold. Take a look at the amount of gold in an ancient Roman fashion, Trump has plastered all around the Oval Office. And take a look at what he's done that no one has ever done in the Oval Office. He's installed 2 huge mirrors. Mirrors. Nobody's ever put up mirrors in the Oval Office. Why? Because a president doesn't need to see what he looks like. But that man, Donald Trump, does. Now, everybody in Moscow, everybody in Tehran, everybody in the Middle East understands now that they're dealing with an emperor who's losing his empire. And the immediate Middle Eastern calculation is if he does too many of these, Vance will be threatened and the army will be threatened. The purges that Trump has announced of senior generals is only one indicator. That's ancient stuff. If to be a soldier, you have to be loyal in a eunuch fashion, in a Hegseth fashion, speaks volumes about the division that will come between Trump and the Pentagon, and sooner or later between Trump and the intelligence services, and sooner or later between Trump and the State Department. So all in all, I believe we can conclude Saturday will show Trump and Witkoff trying to pretend they've achieved something, as they did with the first round of Russian negotiations in Saudi Arabia, while they in fact back down.
Ray, Witkoff is the main objective of what John was talking about. He says that Witkoff is not prepared for that sort of mission, as we've been witnessing with the case of Ukraine or even with the ceasefire. What's your take on that?
Nima and John, I have come not to praise Caesar or Trump or Witkoff, but to bury them. I object to the characterization of Hegseth and J.D. Vance as anything other than honorable men. Of course, they're honorable men in the same sense that Shakespeare portrayed in Julius Caesar. So, what is Trump likely to do at this point? He's likely to fall back and to say, well, look, these were my maximum terms. We're going to cut a deal with Iran, which will not mean the Third World War or even a regional war, because I've since understood that this would be suicide for me. When I did too many tariffs, I understood that it was suicide, and so I backed off. Now, the difference between emperors then and now is that this one has nuclear weapons. This is a really dangerous emperor. And so, thank God, Putin, Xi Jinping, and Pezeshkian are perspicacious people. They know how to deal with a toddler who is doing a tantrum. Okay, let him work it all out until he gets so tired he falls asleep. When he wakes up, you give him some candy to get his sugar up, and then you talk to him and say, look, this is the real world. This is what you're going to do. This is what we will accept and what we won't. So what I'm saying about Witkoff in Oman, getting back to your actual question, Nima, is that people have a very low opinion of Witkoff. Maybe it's because he's from the Bronx, and I resent that heavily because I'm from the Bronx too, okay? Now, I didn't know any real estate developers. All I know is I had to pay a lot of rent, okay? But he's got Trump's ear. He's the Rasputin. He's the guy that is going to discharge what Trump needs to have done. Not Rubio, not that Waltz, what is it, Mike Waltz, not any of these other characters who, although honorable men, don't know their rear ends from their elbows, okay? Yeah, they have a little bit more substantive knowledge about Iran, But I would quibble with the notion that Witkoff needs to know much about Iran. All he needs to know is what his instructions are and that his telephone works when he calls Trump in the White House. In my view, it's very likely now that some kind of initial deal will be worked out. I don't care what happens later. What I care about is that I felt 10 days ago that Trump might be mousetrapped by Netanyahu into waging war on Iran. I was watching Monday very, very carefully, and I saw that Trump was not going to do that. Okay. Instead, the bluster and all this stuff about it's going to be a very bad day, going to be a bad day for Iran. Well, that's BS. I mean, the difference is he said, well, I'm sending my alter ego or my Rasputin or my Henry Kissinger, God help us, to Oman, and they're going to be direct talks. And the Iranians say, no dice direct talks. They're going to be indirect talks. And Trump doesn't say anything. So that was bluster. They're indirect talks. And I like the way John explained what's likely to happen, including his business about, these things are done orally by real estate developers. And there's lots of room for Pishkashian or what's his name now? The foreign. Yeah.
Arabchi.
Yeah. Arachi. Yeah. There's plenty of room for him to say, well, look, all right, we've told these X, Y, and Z terrorists to stand down here in these places where they could harass your troops, or worse still. So what's this business about? You want us to give up our intention to create a nuclear weapon? I mean, I refer you to the annual threat assessment by the U.S. intelligence agency. They say that they're not working and haven't worked on a nuclear weapon for 22 years. So here's the door. You want to push on an open door? Go ahead. You're going to fall flat in your face. But we'll agree to it because we have a religious edict against it. Okay. So a lot of this is just smoke and mirrors. The big thing is, in my view, Netanyahu failed to get Trump to follow through on Netanyahu's attempt to mousetrap him into making war on Iran. Instead, Trump decided to send Witkoff to Oman. We will be watching very closely all day Saturday to see what happens there. But my notion is that this is a very hopeful sign, the more so since if recent reports just today are true, the Iranians have made gestures that would fulfill some of the demands that Trump has made with respect to withholding support for, quote, Iran-supported terrorist groups in the area. I think, it's got to dawn on Trump that his military are a bunch of sycophants, that they bubbled up to become generals because they saluted smartly and said, oh, sure, Mr. President, we can prevail in Ukraine. We can weaken Russia. Don't pay any attention to what Obama said. I know you were his vice president when he said that there was no way Ukraine could prevail in a war against a much stronger Russia. Well, forget about it. You can, Mr. President, because I want my fourth star. It's that simple. These guys are corrupt. Okay, so I don't see much hope for the top military. Now the colonels, they're going to say, look, you're going to order us to do X, Y, and Z. Do you know what that means? Then maybe Trump will be apprised of the fact that this is a very dangerous country, that for the first time in world history, okay, the Iranians have a deterrent against Israel, short world history, right? And that they're prepared to use it and have demonstrated their ability to use it with these hypersonic weapons, okay? And the other thing is this triangular relationship, Russia, China, and the US. It used to be kind of a equilateral triangle, if you guys remember your geometry, right? Okay. Now it's 2 against 1. The long ends of that triangle make it isosceles. And the long ends are China and Russia. And the short end of that stick, or that isosceles triangle, is the US. No one has realized that for years, but Biden should have realized that when his advisors told him to tell Putin in June of 2001, look, they're in Geneva, one-on-one, the only one-on-one. Look, Mr. Putin, we know you got a real problem. You got a real problem with China. There are these tens of thousands of miles of border, and China doesn't only pretend to be the most powerful economic country, but they're going to try to be the most military. They're going to be the most powerful country. We know you got that problem on your border, and we know that this was the word used, that China is squeezing you, Mr. Putin. So we take that into account. Okay, that's what Biden said before he got on the plane leaving Geneva. Nothing could be farther from the real world. And whether Blinken and Sullivan ever comprehended that or not is beyond me. They probably didn't. Maybe these new advisors, maybe Witkoff, real estate developer though he may be, he's smart as hell, and he has no issues, no kind of special grinding that he has to do. So I'm hopeful that the correlation of forces, such as it is, John, you'll remember the Soviets used to always talk about the world correlation of forces, Well, I mean, it's a balance of power 101, but it sounded really good. And it means a hell of a lot. The world correlation of forces has changed, and it's gone east to Russia, China, the rest of the BRICS. And a fellow like Witkoff might be able to understand that. A fellow like Rubio, archdeacon of the people who are so hard-nosed, and this guy Hegseth is my Dick Tracy. He's got a square jaw. He's from Central Casting, and he doesn't know much about anything. Okay, he's gonna tackle China. Right? Give me a break. So this has got to fall apart, as John says it will. It's just a matter of whether this will be gradual or sudden. I see it being gradual, first and foremost, because the U.S. still has nuclear weapons, and its main rivals appreciate that and trim their sails accordingly, even in Ukraine, which we haven't hardly mentioned. Putin is willing, in my view, to let Trump down easy. There's a little flexibility in what the Russians can offer, as long as Trump realizes that he has a pair of deuces and that Putin has a full house, and that Putin could move within the next 2 months to give Trump an embarrassment, the likes of which haven't happened since Afghanistan. I'll quit there.
John, Netanyahu in that clip said that he wants something, a Libya-style sort of negotiations. And do you think that the way we know, at least when I follow the Iranian media, I don't see any sort of evidence that shows Iran would agree to such a deal with the United States. But when Netanyahu is talking about it, he's already talking about whatever they're going to achieve is, if it's not like what they have achieved with Libya, that would not be acceptable for Israel.
Not sure I understand quite your question, Nima.
The question would be, he wants something like Libya, and they could
Yes.
achieve with Libya. If that wouldn't be the case, Israel would not accept it on their part.
Well, let me echo what Ray has just said, but explain more than what your previous guest said about the so-called Libyan model. And then let's come back to the Israeli side of this. Muammar Gaddafi was deceived into thinking that if he abandoned his ambition to develop nuclear weapons, he had US support for his regime. He believed what they told him. Lots of people told him, don't be fooled. And he had made a career since, as an army captain, he took power in Libya, in not believing what the Americans believed. But Gaddafi in 2003 understood very quickly by 2006, when the US launched a bombing raid to kill him, that he had been deceived. Saddam made something similar of a mistake in believing that US undertakings to him, including intelligence, encouragement to attack Iran, etc., and so on, meant that he was being treated as a significant Arab leader that the US would respect and work with peaceably. He was fooled too. The Arabs understand this, as did Hafez al-Assad, and he communicated to Bashir, his son, that you could never trust the US not to try to overthrow you, let alone use of the Israelis to overthrow you as well. So it's impossible, even before the murder of Gaddafi in 2011, that anyone in the Middle East, including the Saudis, let alone the Iranians, would believe that a Libyan solution, as Netanyahu described it, would be acceptable, because it basically would mean that they would be signing their death certificate as Gaddafi signed his, Saddam signed his. So when Netanyahu raises the Libyan model, he's telling you what Israelis in their expansionist sub-imperial mode want to achieve. And they've done a pretty good job, with help of the Turks, to have achieved that by destroying Syria. Syria is no longer an Arab state. It is a partition state run by Turkey, Israel, and the United States. It makes sense for Netanyahu to describe what he has in mind for Iran as the Libyan model. He could have described it as a Syrian model. That would open wounds, wouldn't it? From a Russian point of view, none of this achieves stability. None of it. It leaves the region in this state of mutual threat, which we've just described isn't likely to lead to a US attack on Iran. That brings us back to where we go next week with Russia, China, the three angles on Ray's triangle.
Yeah. Ray, do you think that Russia is, as John mentioned yesterday, there was a meeting and in which Russia, Iran, and China were talking about Iran's nuclear program. But how much are they really concerned about the way that the United States is dealing with Iran, or they want to, or Iran is interested in informing them what's going on between Iran and the United States?
Well, I was watching what happened in the White House on Monday very, very closely, but not as closely as those three specialist people from China, Russia, and Iran were watching it from Moscow. They saw the same thing I did. I immediately said, when I heard that Witkoff was going to go to Oman, my God, Netanyahu didn't get what he wanted here. This is exactly the opposite of what he wanted. He didn't want negotiations. He wanted war, okay? So I was encouraged by that. And I've told you other reasons. So were they, okay? And they kept their counsel. You're quite right in pointing out that this was about Iran nuclear. Maria Zakharova actually made a formal announcement saying, look, these three are going to talk about this subject, talk about other things too, tariffs, if you will, but that's what they were focusing on. And what was the demonstration? The demonstration was that you got two ends of this triangle that used to be equilateral and now is isosceles, and Iran all together plotting what they're going to do depending on what happens in the White House Monday. They're meeting on Tuesday. So I think they too were gratified that there's going to be a meeting in Oman. Whether it's direct or indirect, it doesn't really matter. It was interesting to me that although Trump said this is a direct meeting, the Iranian foreign minister was not 1 hour later saying, no, it's indirect, like we always insisted. Don't fool yourself. He could say it's direct, but we say it's indirect, and we prevail on this one, okay? So here comes Witkoff. We'll have to see what eventuates, but I think the heat will be a little bit off because Trump is not embarrassed to back off. I mean, he puts out these maximalist demands and then he backs off. I think that list of demands he made of Iran came directly from Mossad and from Netanyahu. This is what the Israelis' maximum position was. I know whether Rubio and Hegseth realized that. I mean, they think the same way, these neocons, but that's what they gave to Trump. Now Trump can back off that. It seems to me pretty easily. Now, the big thing is Trump is in other trouble deep, as we used to say in the comic books, okay? He's in deep trouble, all right? Why? He's taken on the deep state. Now, there is no doubt, given the most recent revelations from the John Kennedy murder papers, assassination papers, that was done by the CIA in cooperation with parts of the Defense Department, actually probably parts of the Secret Service and the FBI, okay? Did Lyndon Johnson know about it? Well, there's no good evidence, conclusive evidence, that he knew about it beforehand, although there is some evidence that his Secret Service people told him that. But surely he led the cover-up, didn't he? I mean, who appointed Alan Dulles to be chief of staff to be the most prominent member on the Warren Commission? Those papers show that the two of the top leaders, Richard Helms, for whom I worked, James Angleton, for whom I never worked, thank God, and this guy who was the covert action chief in Miami, they all lied under oath. That's clear from documentary evidence now. They all know all about Oswald. They groomed them to be the patsy. And there's all kinds of evidence. There were more than one shot. The whole thing is kind of falling apart under that testimony. Now, what else has Trump tried to do? He's tried to release, and he's going to release, I do believe, all those papers that show that the head of the FBI, James Comey, the head of the CIA, John Brennan, leaders of the Justice Department and other organs of our government at that point tried mightily to sabotage him so he would not win in 2016, and then did emasculate him during those 4 years in which he was president the first time. Now, what am I saying? I'm saying that if he releases those papers, this is not a petty thing. These guys did crimes, okay? They did crimes because, as James Comey once said in his book, I was operating in an environment in which Hillary Rodham Clinton was sure to be the next president of the United States, period. Well, if you're operating in that environment, you do all kinds of extra legal things with the prospect that you would be attorney general or you'd be promoted, you wouldn't be put in jail. So those are the stakes. Now, why do I say a lot? Because I think I've been trying to put myself in the shoes of Kremlin leaders for, would you say, 6 decades now? And if I were Putin, or let's say I was giving the president's daily brief to Putin, as I used to do for Nixon, Ford, and Reagan, I would say, Mr. President, I need to tell you that Trump is not only in big trouble internationally, he's in danger internally. The last person who reached out to create a decent relationship with Russia was John Kennedy. He made a big speech saying, look, unique among major powers, America and Russia have not been in a major war. We cooperated in World War II, where the Russians lost 20 million people. Up to date figures are 27, right? So let's reach out because we all want the same good things for our children. There's no reason why we can't have a rapprochement. And indeed, they had a limited test ban treaty within 2 months, okay? They had to get rid of them. So what's my point? Well, as a briefer of President Putin, I said, Mr. Putin, this is what happened, and now the proof is abundant. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is what happened to the last guy, the last president who tried to reach out and have a decent relationship. Now it's even harder for Trump to do that because every American citizen, except those that watch your program, Nima, and the judges and others, everyone is brainwashed. And I use that term advisedly, brainwashed, and thinking that Putin is the worst devil in the world, that the Russians all hate us. They don't, but that doesn't matter because that's the perception. As a matter of fact, let me just put this before you. If I, oh yeah, here it is. You know, when I was in Germany about 7 years ago, I saw this button, and I think I may have shown this before in your program, Nima, but it's Putin, and it says Putin verstehe, which means verstehen means to understand in German. So it's somebody who understands Putin or tries to. Okay. Well, I grabbed the button. Oh, this is so enlightening and so encouraging. So there are people in Germany that want to understand Putin. My friend said, no, put that thing down. Don't wear that thing. That's a pejorative. That's the worst thing you can do in Germany, to be somebody who is trying to understand Putin. Now, guess what? 3 weeks ago, Angela Merkel defended my hope, and she said, you know, it's not a sin to be a Putin versteher. As a matter of fact, the West bears some blame for what's happened in Ukraine, says Angela Merkel. Okay, so I'm trying to verstehen, I'm trying to understand Putin. The rest of you should. Now, that's not the case in the United States. We have no Angela Merkel. We have nobody that stands up and says, look, as I do, that Putin, we're lucky to have Putin because he's very perspicacious, he's very gradualist, he's brought the Soviet Union, he's brought Russia back to where it is a prosperous country. He knows how to work around the sanctions, and he's been really, really resolute in not rubbing Ukrainians or the U.S. faces in what's happening in Ukraine. He's won, but he's not rubbing it in. So what am I just saying? I'm saying that if I were telling Putin all this, I would say, look, Mr. Putin, you got your work cut out for you. It's really, really good that you're proceeding gradually, because this guy, Trump, is reaching out to you in a very dangerous way. He's got incredible internal problems and alarms. And bottom line, Mr. Putin, he's not going to be around very much longer. This is what the intelligence people are telling me. This is what some of the think tanks in the university are telling me. Mr. Putin, deal with Trump now. Make sure you're flexible enough to allow him to climb down easy from the defeat in Ukraine that he can blame on others. Here's an idea, Mr. Putin. You might want to say, Mr. Trump, make a big speech. Mr. Trump, I know Biden told everyone that I was going to take Poland and the Baltic states, but I promise, and I have agreed to you, that I am not going to take Poland. I'm not going to take the Baltic states. Matter of fact, I don't want all of Ukraine. So let's just deal, okay? And we can. That's what you could do, because then most people will say, "My God, can we trust? Can we trust Putin?" And the proof will be in the pudding. You negotiate with these people. I think that you could probably do a deal with Trump, and I think that your strong stance on Iran, together with Comrade Xi, has been a major influence in talking Turkey to Trump, lest he let himself be mousetrapped by Netanyahu into a major war in Iran.
John, do you want to add something?
A number of things. First of all, the latest news of Trump's back down on the tariffs is an escalation of war against China. He says, based on the lack of respect, I'm reading from his tweet, the lack of respect that China has shown to the world's markets, I'm hereby raising the tariff 125%. To accuse China of lack of respect is a slap in the face. It's escalating war, economic war against China. And China has yet to demonstrate its capacity to do more than talk words or spend money. We are at the point which Russia understands. President Xi has been briefed by President Putin a number of times to understand when words are empty, force prevails. So the calculation of force, correlation of force, threat of force recommends, one, Russia and China are at war with the United States. Trump will not remove the deep state. The deep state will remove Trump if he continues to show the level of ancient Roman Empire weakness as an empire, weakness as a ruler. Therefore, Russia correctly does a number of things. It keeps Trump satisfied that progress is being made, though we can see Trump saying one thing one day, I'm pissed off. He can't even use non-expletive language in regard to the president of a nuclear power. He should watch his mouth, but he can't. He can only look in his mirror, and everyone around him sees the vulnerability for them for that. So what does Putin do? He sends Kirill Dmitriev, the head of Russia's direct investment fund, to have what Dmitriev, who has a very high opinion of himself, to 10 hours of talks in Washington. Now, when I've asked my Russian sources and friends, what do they make of Kirill Dmitriev's 10 hours in Washington this past week? Was Kirill Dmitriev a Trojan horse? Was he sent to offer gifts that the United States business community, in some theory of how US lobbying in Washington works on a president, was Dmitriev a Trojan horse? The reply I got back was no. The Russian side understands there's a lot of donkeys around Trump, so they sent a Trojan donkey. What does this mean? It means, as Ray said, that the Russian strategy is to allow the personality of the President of the United States time enough to give Russia some advantages, which they're proceeding to do. Normalization of State Department, Russian Foreign Ministry talks will get underway, if I'm not mistaken, any day now. Ambassador Dachiev with Deputy Undersecretary, can't get much lower, Susan Coulter. That's an advance. It's a small one, but it's a positive one. There are advances in talks, but no outcomes. The Ukrainians continue to bombard all of the energy infrastructure that President Putin has sworn off attacking on the Ukraine. So the Ukrainian violation of the Witkoff-Trump temporary ceasefire on energy infrastructure has been violated every half day by the Ukrainians. So force rules. Force will rule. We're at war. And China has now got to demonstrate it can do more than mouth ineffectual peace proposals for regions of the country in which it believes it's got money power but no military power. So to send Trojan donkeys to Washington and have them accepted is a further indication that Trump's time is running out, that Russia's advantage must be to maintain force on the front, on winning the war by force, not by conceding in negotiation. And we will have on May 9 a display of at least President Putin, President Xi, and as confirmed today by the Kremlin, Prime Minister Modi, the big three in the world. Now,
and De Silva, and De Silva, and De Silva from Brazil.
I'm sorry, I won't offend anyone here by saying that Brazil is not a big three. What would be a big four would be if President Trump wants to stand on the platform or sit on that platform as a personal display. He might, in his way of thinking, his entirely personal way of thinking, want to be seen there and try to upstage the others. We'll see. However, force is ruling now, and Trump has made a series of mistakes that are seriously threatening to himself inside his own court. Serious, rational calculation on the Russian side says we will escalate in Sumy region, which is what's happening, to cut off the Ukrainian army's threat to Belgorod region. We will prove that there is no temporary ceasefire possibility with the Ukrainians. We will attack, as they did in Kryvyi Rog this week, an assembly of Ukrainian and foreign commanders. When force rules, you don't relax, and you watch what happens in ancient Rome in the Oval Office, and you wait.
Yeah, John, with respect to Dmitriev, he did spend long hours in Washington. He was the first senior Russian official to travel to Washington since before the special military operation. And when he left, he said, it's going to be a tough 3 steps forward. We did 3 steps forward. Now, I have to think that's more than just rhetoric. Even if it's just rhetoric, it's the projection that the Russians would like to do now, and to say, look, we are making incremental progress in talking with Trump.
I don't agree, Ray. I think sorry to interrupt. We're outside of Russia, and I'm not going to talk about inside Russia politics outside of Russia. But let me be clear. Mr. Dmitriev has a very high opinion of himself. He has a very high opinion of his US training, and he has a very high opinion of how to make money for Russia, for himself, with those counterparts that Vitkov has introduced to him. But he is also a contender for the succession, the political succession in Russia. He's just another Alexei Kudrin, who wanted first to be prime minister of Russia and then president of Russia. Kirill Dmitriev must be understood in domestic Russian political terms. When he opens his mouth, he's talking partly to the United States money bags and partly to the political succession race in Russia. Such a man cannot be taken for what his words mean in any other context. So he is exaggerating to boost himself. He's pursuing a policy of Trojan donkeys, rewards in the theory that if American business sees the opportunity to sell Boeing parts or Boeing aircraft in Russia, or some deal in the Arctic, or some rare earth metals, if those businesses will support a peaceful arrangement with Russia, they will lobby and whisper in Trump's ear that peace is better than war. That's
Right.
the theory of lobbying. And frankly speaking, Dmitriev is right to pursue it, but wrong to believe it.
Well,
To see the rest of the outcome in anything else but Russian presidential succession terms is a mistake. Kudrin was a mistake. He made misjudgments. His ambition got the better of him. No matter how close he was to the president, he's been booted out of Russian politics for good. Dmitriev is trying again, and that's how he should be understood in Russian terms.
well, John, a lot of us have an exaggerated opinion of ourselves. That doesn't really affect me very much with respect to Dmitriev. My view is that Putin sent him. That means something. I don't think Dmitriev would be saying 3 steps forward without full approval from Putin. And let's remember, Dmitriev participated in one other not so long ago meeting in Saudi Arabia. Do you remember that, John?
Yes, but
was-
what happened there? But he tried to upstage the foreign minister. Sergei
He was-
Lavrov slapped him down. The reporting in Moscow, and we said it on this program before the reporting in Moscow, Dmitriev thought he had a seat at the table on the Russian side. Ushakov, Lavrov, Dmitriev.
He was there
Lavrov
for-
said, get
he was
off,
there
get
for-
off
he
this table. No,
was
no,
there
no,
f-
it was, sorry,
He was there for a different purpose.
no.
And
And
yeah, he was there already
No, and yet-
before the delegation. Sure, he had a different purpose there, and they allowed him to have his say after the negotiations were concluded. All I'm saying is that it doesn't matter to me what you or what I think of Dmitriev. If Putin sends him as the first representative of Russia since the special military operation, and then if he reports 3 steps forward, all I'm saying is that the Kremlin would like to project the image that on Ukraine, at least, we see ways to ease into a more normal relationship, and that this, in my view, is Putin's priority. He knows that he has the strong cards. Trump knows that Putin has the strong cards, and they're going to do some sort of a deal on Ukraine after another month or two, in my view. And to the degree Dmitriev is a sort of a John the Baptist on this thing, sort of a precursor, a kind of a person that sort of soothes the way with very important people. Let's face it. I mean, Witkoff and those people that he introduced him to are important people in Trump's scheme of things. So all I'm saying here is that what Trump is trying to do is reach out when the Kremlin tries to create an appearance of normalcy, get the embassies up working, get a resurgence of the notion that the United States and Russia defeated the Nazis together. Okay, that's going to happen on May 8th, May 9th. I think Trump would love to go, but he's not going to be invited, in my view, not unless he comes full circle and really does a major move on peace toward in Ukraine. But this is all kind of up in flux, and the realities are that, in my view, Putin and Trump are both committed personally to a decent relationship. Peskov, Putin's spokesman, has said that there's a growing trust here, and that both people understand each other quite well. And of course, Witkoff and Trump, to a degree, have said the same thing. This is new, John. This is something that they've gone out on a limb to project. And so, in my view, this means something. It means that it means a lot of things, but it means that this is the paramount interest in both capitals, and that this plays a role in places like the Persian Gulf as well, because Trump is not going to let Netanyahu, even Netanyahu, Trump's not going to let Netanyahu divert him from his priorities, and that is to create a decent relationship with Russia. He's got a tough row to hoe, but I think he's going to do it, and that explains a lot of things of what he's doing, not only with respect to the Persian Gulf, but with respect to Ukraine as well. Those are my views. That let 100 flowers bloom.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ray and John. Great pleasure, as always, to have you both on.
Thank you, Nima. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Ray.